And we're live. Good morning. Welcome everyone to the Progressive Parenting Network's show. We are going to be talking today to two amazing guests, and I don't know if you can tell, but I am crazy excited. Not about the topic per se, but more about who my guests are. Kind of geeking out, and if you guys watch the show, then you know how I do tend to geek out on these amazing people that I admire so much. I'm very honored to have these two guests today. The first that I'd like to introduce you to is Dr. James McKenna. He is a biocultural pathologist from the University of Notre Dame who has been studying maternal infant sleep physiology for over 30 years. The Reverend Edmund P. Joyce, CSC Endowed Chair in Anthropology and Director of the Mother-Baby Behavioral Sleep Lab at Notre Dame. His research focuses on studying the biology and behavior of mother-infant co-sleeping within the context of a breastfeeding relationship. And that his work has yielded important contributions to our understanding of infant sleep architecture and SIDS. My other guest today is Marcy Axness, Dr. Marcy Axness, PhD. She is an early development specialist, popular international speaker, and author of Parenting for Peace, Raising the Next Generation of Peacemakers. She is a top blogger at mothering.com and a member of their expert panel. She's featured in several documentary films as an expert in adoption, prenatal development, and Waldorf education. Dr. Axness has a private practice coaching parents in progress. She considers as one of her most important credentials that she raised two peacemakers to share with the world. So I am super excited to have them both here. Let me get back on camera. I brought these two amazing people here today to discuss with us something that I saw pop up on Facebook that really caught my attention, and it was from, of course, right here you go. Here you go, buddy. He just wanted me to look at him. Was this thing from Fox News. I saw it pop up, and it was this newfangled way to get your baby to sleep through the night. So, of course, I'm clutching my heart and kind of freaking out, afraid to look at it. And indeed, when it popped up, it was a little frightening. And it's this new book that's come out, and I think the part that upset me a little bit was that it was written by pediatricians. So let's start talking about this right now. I'm going to start with Dr. Axness here. I saw that you posted actually on their Facebook page, so I know that you feel very strongly about it. What could be wrong with a book that's just trying to help parents to get their poor babies to sleep through the night?
Well, you know, I have tremendous empathy for parents who are sleep deprived and all they want is a good night's sleep. We can all relate to that. I've been there, and I will self-disclose right off the top that I actually did Ferber. Yes, folks, I did it. I didn't know what I know now. I wouldn't do it again. So what's wrong with the book? Well, first I want to start off with a little good news. I checked in on Amazon today. I looked up their book on Amazon, and it's only ranking 15,000 in sales. It has a ton of terrible reviews, 2-star average review, and they're only at 15,000 in sales ranking. And I've been in the book business now for a couple of years, and I know that after you've appeared on national media, if you're only at 15,000, I have faith in parents. I do. And so I've got to say that from what I've read, and you can't read much and they don't have a bibliography, where do I start, Gina?
Right. Let me.
Where do I start?
I know it's kind of a thing where you're speechless, but
I'll start by saying this is my little, because there's so much territory here, and Dr. McKenna, I'm geeking out too. I'm so happy to be on with you. So admire your work.
You can say that.
And so my little piece of the territory is, I think when we parent, we set our sights on where we want to go, like a sailboat course, and you chart your course, and you make your choices based on what you want, what you hope for your child. And this choice of following this method diverts from raising a peaceful generation for sure. So that's all I'll say for now.
Okay. So again, thank you for joining us, Dr. McKenna.
My pleasure.
So this book that we're talking about, I want to start off by saying uh, I'm not trying. I really don't want to disparage the authors per se so much as the content. If we're talking about getting our babies to sleep through the night, it's I understand it. I have a baby. In fact, he's fussing right now because he wants me to pick him up. Of course he does. Who doesn't want to be held? And it's exhausting. I've been at it now for 3 months, and it's exhausting. And your nighttime parenting. I think new parents, nobody tells them that your parent, you don't stop parenting just because the sun goes down, and it can be really exhausting and wear you out. And sometimes you just wish you could have a break. I get that, I totally do. But why wouldn't we want our babies to sleep through the night? What's the big deal? Why would anybody be upset about that?
Well, I can chime in here. I mean, I think that the best thing going for us insofar as what kind of philosophy this represents, it really isn't an innocent one. And I really respect Gina. I've always tried to do this myself. You don't go after people, you go after the ideas they represent. But this seems so blatant, and I can't understand how even normative pediatric education would permit these two gentlemen to promote an idea that isn't just neutral or a philosophy, but is indeed dangerous. I mean, anybody that could say that it's beneficial to give little newborn babies Benadryl as a way to getting them to sleep through the night is really launched onto a very different trajectory. And I think that why I have reacted, as is obvious by the overwhelming rejection of this particular book, is that it is indeed dangerous. They seem to think that the only good baby is a sleeping baby, and they even actually say that not to sleep train, suggesting not to use their book, is selfish by parents in and of itself. But there's just so much absolutely uh, false, fallacious information. It absolutely follows no um, paradigm of information about who babies are and what babies need. Doctors seem to confuse the idea that babies are born wanting something when babies don't want anything at birth and or the perinatal period. They need, but they don't want. Their cognitive and their social and emotional, capacities are limited by their neurogenesis. Human babies are born 25% of their brain volume. They're not thinking about, aha, how am I going to get my mom to do my bidding? These babies are born with needs, and they gradually over the first year they begin to be able to understand how they can engage, and with that comes the ability to behave in ways that one chooses, but certainly not in the beginning. But I'll just jump in with a point that I am familiar with, and I did see the quote, and unfortunately I vowed never to respond to books that I didn't read because you never really know what they're said. But I think the overwhelming letters that I saw on the critiques on Amazon really gave me a good sense. And I also did recover a few quotes from friends that sent them to me. But they absolutely talk about co-sleeping as if it's a selfish act that parents exhibit. And they even make the point that I maybe mentioned this already, that not to sleep train their baby is in fact an act of selfishness,
Yeah.
and that babies are socio-emotionally and psychologically damaged for life by co-sleeping. And this is just one actually fine example of how these individuals have absolutely no clue that if you make a statement like that, you have to have empirical data behind you. And the empirical data, which is available for anybody to see on my website if you'd like to look at the refereed articles that I report there, that if anything, the when the nature of the relationship brought to bed to share through the years is healthy and normative and affirmative, it actually contributes to independence, to a strong gender identity, to resilience psychologically. It provides for a less fearful individual, a more optimistic individual. Now I'm not just talking wishfully. I'm basing these on well-established, rigorous scientific studies that we have about 10 to 14 studies of various kinds that would reveal and completely negate this simplistic and incorrect comment specific comment about co-sleeping. So I guess, you know, you have to wonder, these individuals have had 10 to 20 years of pediatric experience. Were they
Well,
not
they
looking
said 30 between the two of them.
Okay, so about 15 years each. Well, do they not know babies at all? I mean, this is one of these great examples where a cultural model having nothing to do with babies themselves is being opposed on babies. Literally, it has nothing to do with babies. It has everything to do with ideologies and wishful thinking and
And
well,
money. Let's
yeah.
not forget money, James.
Well, I'm trying to be a little generous there, but it's clear that Penguin certainly didn't do any kind of
Due
uh,
diligence. Shame on Penguin.
this is all about making money. And I've always been suspicious. I'm sure most parents are now at this point too. Anybody that says all you have to do is my 7 steps for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness with your baby, you are immediately suspicious of, because life is complex. Here, Gina knows as much about babies as anyone and has experienced as anyone, and the challenges and the unpredictable characteristics of her baby and in her point in life. This is what parents learn. It, Raising a child is constant engagement and learning and responding and adjusting, and it's not a simple um, job to take on, but one that obviously we all appreciate and in the end we value more than anything.
Well, and that's one of my points. I'm really a pragmatist, and I really wrote my book with that idea. We really want to change the world. We have to raise a different kind of individual. And so, one could say, hey, if some parent is going to use this method because they so need that sleep, that's their business. It isn't their business. Their child is going to be the person tending to me in the nursing home in 30 years in a non-empathic manner. So it is my business. I take it very personally, just like when the driver on the road cuts me off.
Well, one thing that if I had the physicians here and they were on the program, I would say to them is, the job of an infant is very different from the job of a parent. Um, they're like two different species in the beginning, insofar as sleep clocks and what babies can or cannot do. One of the interesting comments they make about the Benadryl issue, which is no less than dangerous for babies, is that it permits, isn't it great that we have Benadryl to be able to reset the sleep clock of the newborn? Well, that's reflective of the fact that babies don't have any sleep clocks yet. That's the very point I'm about to make. The job of the baby is to provide the basis, nutritional basis, and the sensory basis by which this brain of theirs is going to double in size and quality during the first year of life. The job of the baby is to feed, sleep, wake all the night through. That's its job. And that's what parents are, despite how difficult it can be in our urban complex society. And that's the kind of care and the kinds of needs that parents are needing to respond to. It's not really geometry here. It's a pretty fundamentally simple system, however challenging it might be.
So I wanted to share something that was shocking to me. Maybe upsetting is a better word. I was just really, really surprised that these guys are. Gosh, everything I want to say sounds rude.
Oh, go on, Gina. Don't be PC. We're just friends here.
These are guys who went to college. So in the book, I'm quoting, some so-called experts theorize that babies aren't meant to sleep overnight, period, that they need to be fed on a 24-hour cycle. Others will tell you that babies can only be sleep trained at a certain age, and that it's asking too much of them physically and mentally before then. These claims are just not true. They might be completely well-intentioned, but they're also unfounded. As we'll address in more detail in the following pages, there is no established evidence that infants need to feed overnight to maintain healthy weight gain or development, or that being trained to sleep overnight puts a baby at risk a baby's long-term health. In reality, the arguments against baby sleep training are emotional, not rational. Have you ever had a friend who's afraid of flying? You show them all the irrefutable statistics proving that air travel is the safest mode of transportation available, but while they're happy to get in a car, going up in the sky in a jet remains out of the question. Even they admit their fear is not rational, it's purely emotional. We can look at baby sleep training in much the same way. All objective evidence points to it being safe. So please do yourself and your child a favor. Let there be sleep. Okay. Here's what I don't get. I don't see all the work that you've been doing for 30 years at Notre Dame as emotional.
Right.
I don't understand that at all. Where they're talking about people who won't look at the evidence and who are being irrational, that's kind of what they're doing. So I don't get it. I don't understand it at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's obvious that the authors have not begun with asking the fundamental question and that is not whether or not parents need sleep, but what is the biology of the human infant, and what does the hardcore science tell us that babies need? And what they really need is continuous contact and proximity with their parent, not just for breastfeeding, but for that sensory engagement that actually is much more than a nice social idea for the neurologically immature baby. For the baby, its own physiology is defined very specifically in relationship to the physiology and the contact it has with its primary caregivers. Touching a baby, breathing on a baby, letting the baby smell your exhaled air, the heat radiating from your body, the vestibular stimulation you give that baby penetrates right into this baby's own physiology. Do you remember Winnicott's most beautiful phrase? He said it the best, and it's the core of all my scientific work, and that is that there really is no such thing as a baby. There is a baby in someone. That's just not wishful thinking. That is, in fact, absolutely the beginning point for scientific conceptualizations of babies, and thus a basis by which you can look at what babies need. Remember that the shape and the size of the human pelvis was terrific for bipedalism, that is upright posture. But at the very same time that our little babies were getting bigger brains by virtue of fetal development, the pelvic outlet of the human was getting smaller and smaller, wherein requiring the earlier birth of the human baby relative to the type of brain and the volume, the brain size it will eventually reach. So unlike other mammals, our babies have 25% of its brain. Another way to put it is we have 75% of brain growth in what amounts to, as many people have called, the fourth trimester, which is after the baby is born. So the idea that the social care is synonymous with physiological regulation has been supported in thousands of papers, not just my own, that when you touch babies and you're close to them and you give them skin to skin, their bodies are functioning very, very differently insofar as every variable that we clinically measure and use to signify health and well-being: heart rate variability, heart pressure, hormonal status, body temperature, breathing rate, the nutritional, the ability of the baby's even intestine to absorb calories is determined by the amount of touch that baby gets during the day. This is Tiffany Field's work that showed that babies grow 47% more of their weight when they are touched regularly during the day, and that's been replicated about 4 times. That's not somebody's wishful thinking here. This is telling you something about who babies are and what babies need, and how that contact through the night and through the day. Babies don't live on a 6 to 6 timetable. It's fairly continuous here. I've always been amazed over the fact that somehow we expected our babies to know that all the good things everybody promotes during the day, touch, contact, affirmation, are somehow off limits during the night between 6 and 6 in the morning, as if that has any reality whatsoever, or even biological makes any biological sense at all. So,
well, that type of thinking I think is dangerous. I'm sorry, Dr. Axness. I was just thinking that we're giving these parents the idea that there is no nighttime parenting, that you just kind of work from like a regular work day when you have kids, and it's not like that, and it's not fair to the baby. So I'm glad you were going to say something, Dr. Axness, because I was going to ask you a question. So perfect.
Well, and I mean, this is really just echoing what Dr. McKenna has laid out so so thoroughly and with such amazing science behind it. But I remember going to so many talks by Joseph Chilton Pierce, and him talking about, if our brains really developed all the way in the womb, we'd never get out of there, and pointing out that human breast milk is the wateriest, thinnest milk in the human kingdom, and that is by design, so that we will reestablish that connection, that multi-strand connection. Dr. McKenna mentioned so many of the different forms of bio-regulatory function, and Joe brings up also the heart field piece of it, that our hearts put out a very strong EMF field. And HeartMath studies this, and that this is another piece that baby needs to have reestablished on a very regular basis, or else all of these, I quote psychiatrists who wrote a wonderful book called The General Theory of Love. I cite them a lot in my book, and they talk about the somatic disarray that a baby falls into when submitted to subjected to separation. And so that's what we're talking about. Now we're focusing right now on the nighttime with no feeding. Don't even get me started on the feeding training and stretching the stomach. I mean, honestly, I know they want to reprogram or rewire the brain to expect larger feedings at fewer intervals. But the baby is supposed to be, there fussing, wanting to eat, while we're like dangling mobiles in front of the baby and distracting it away from its distress. I don't even get me started on the imprint, the psychosocial imprint that creates.
Well, the other issue is that insofar as the metabolic system of every baby is really different, and they're kind of the architect of having their own needs really met as regards their own energy requirements and growth rates, et cetera, et cetera. And to make those cavalier statements that you can just as well and as effectively have a baby meet its nutritional needs by securing milk only during the day is absolutely, utterly false. The amount of feeding, the quality of the feeding, the psychosocial status of the baby being deprived during the night of contact and the proximity that it needs will change everything about that baby. And it is absolutely not the case, there's no science to show that at all, that a baby, all it is the amount of quantity. For one thing, the milk at night, a woman's milk is different. The composition is quite different. Between the early morning hours of between like 3:30 and 7, there is much more fat in human milk. And as was mentioned a minute ago, human milk is designed specifically and only exquisitely for the human infant's gut. It's almost a living liquid. It changes in terms of the gestational age at which the baby's born. It changes from the first amount of milk going into the baby's stomach, which is the water, and then the protein, and then the fat is the last part of the feed. It adjusts itself in terms of the hormonal signals that the baby is getting from the mother's own pre-hormones and enzymes that are shaping the temperaments and trajectory and the rate by which myelinization is occurring in the brain. This is not a kind of nice social idea that a baby is regulating its own metabolic and energetic requirements. It's a real biological fact that the baby's feelings for feeding when it elicits a feed are very, very important to the nature of the milk the baby is getting and how much it's getting and when it is getting it to meet particularly cyclical requirements that change during a 24-hour cycle for a baby. So none of these issues are talked to at all. In fact, I'm pretty certain based on what I've read that these particular physicians are not well versed in human infant development at all. They would not be making culturally, ideologically based statements like this where there's no science to support it, and furthermore, it's putting babies in jeopardy, and it is producing, and my guess would be, ill health, not health. Let me just address the issue of the ever sleeping baby. The only good baby is a baby that sort of never wakes up.
Right.
We've learned that arousals are extremely important for babies. That when mothers and babies sleep together, or even separate surface co-sleeping, it doesn't matter what, that the baby is awakening much more frequently, not just to feed, but insofar as a coupling takes place between, and Gina, I'm sure you know this, or most of the time you don't know it, but when I watch them through my infrared tapes, what's fascinating is babies and mothers, when they're sleeping next to each other, are waking each other up constantly with little transient arousals that are detectable sometimes by the behavior of each, but not always. But the arousals and the coughing or the touching or the movements of each is registered by the brain insofar as a brainwave change. And sometimes that changes the actual sleep progression from stage 1, 2, 3, and REM. So what I'm trying to say is constantly through the night is this engagement that is being detected by both the mother and the baby that's changing unknowingly the trajectory of the rest of the night. Suppose you cough in the middle of the night. Your baby opens its eyes for a second and then goes right back to sleep. And what occurs is that baby jumps from perhaps stage 3 back to stage 2 sleep. And it will be a different kind of baby physiologically the entire rest of the night. So in an odd, interesting way, the baby's physiology is in a whole variety of ways being reset all night. It's being changed by the relationship it has to its caregiver. And it oxygenates when it arouses. We tend to think of arousals that are bad, but it's a way in which the baby protects itself from prolonged apneas and resets kind of ill-devised cardiac patterns, perturbations of the heart, which are kind of normal for all of us, but they're stabilized in this very immature little baby by virtue of the contact and the sounds and the touches and the rhythms that are created by its caregiver's body. So
Can I jump in? Can I
sure.
jump in here? There's such an important phrase. I mean, everything you're saying is just music to my ears, Dr. McKenna. But that phrase of, the baby responding to its relationship with the caregiver. See, this is what creates a tremendous amount of concern for me about this approach. This reminds me of the famous and disturbing but informative work of Harry Harlow with baby macaque monkeys.
Mm-hmm.
And the phrase that, the monkey's behavior reoriented itself in response to its lack of security.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And we saw psychosocial derangement because of the cold unresponsiveness of the surrogate mother.
Right.
And are we going to raise a cohort of little Harlow monkeys?
Yeah,
That's very scary to me.
it's a great area to bring up, Marcy, for sure. Again, that is a whole nother area of research, and I always stress this to my undergraduates and anybody that will listen, that breastfeeding and contact isn't just about milk being delivered. It's the social engagement that is required and surrounds it and envelops it. And this is as contributory to the psychobiological development of the scaffolding of emotional, cognitive, and intellectual bases of babies. This absolute delivery system and the turn-taking behavior, the gazing behavior, the nonverbal cues and signals that the mother and the baby are giving each other is like going to school 24 hours a day, and it's continued during the night when the baby is sleeping. The delivery system is enormously critical.
My fear is for like a new parent getting a hold of this is thinking that the baby is that all they need is food, that all breast milk is a way to keep them alive, and that it's nothing more than that. That it's just if you just feed your baby enough, they'll sleep through the night, and leaving everything out. That this is a human being that you've created and you've brought into the world that you're lucky enough to have, and we're treating it like a thing, like a blob that just needs to be fed, like my plants. But our babies are annoying plants because they won't let us sleep. And we're looking at the baby in almost a violent way in that way. If we're talking about, like, if you take nonviolent communication into a different way, that it's violent to say that a good baby is a sleeping baby, that, because everything else would be not acceptable. that your baby's behaving in an unacceptable way, there's no love there, there's no empathy, and I think it's making parents look at that kind of thinking would make a parent look at their child as an inconvenience and not a miracle.
Well, let me just, I think it's a little bit of a feedback loop, of an iterative feedback loop. I think maybe, and again, this gets into walking that fine line, of being polite, being respectful, but there, I guess, to me, in my mind, there is a particular type of person who is going to be more oriented to this approach, and to whom this approach is going to speak more strongly. I would say that anybody choosing this approach needs to be fully informed of, and clearly parents choosing this approach want quick, simple, easy, convenient. So quickly, they should know that this kind of training causes a huge increase of the flow of the stress hormone cortisol, flowing in the baby's body, in the baby's brain. Cortisol being one of the most neurotoxic substances we know of, meaning it kills brain cells. They should know that they're training their baby not just to sleep for many hours at a time, but they're also training the baby's brain to wire up differently than it would if they were to be responding to their baby's natural needs, as Dr. McKenna has outlined them. This brain that will be wiring up to be able to survive in a less caring, more brutal world. And statistically speaking, not for any one individual baby, this kind of care, this kind of non-responsive, non-attuned care is more likely to result in a less empathic, more hyperactive kid, good luck in school, and quite possibly someone who's more prone to aggression, depression, to addiction. So there's my nutshell right there.
Well, that was, you brought up Joseph Chilton Pierce, and I remember seeing him in the movie What Babies Want that Debbie Takawa made. And he talks about that, where if we're not responding to the baby's needs, the baby is deciding, even in the womb, like let's say mom has a very stressful time. We're talking about just developing in the womb, and let's say a partner died, or she had a lot of stress. So what's happening just even in the womb is that there's like a decision to, are we going to be more advanced, like have that forebrain going on, or is that hind brain going to be what develops? And so that does that carry on into after they're born as well, where they're
absolutely. Absolutely. We're talking about the development of these prefrontal lobes, which develop in layers, in stages and layers. And what Joe was always saying is we're always making a decision, not in that cognitive way. I'm sure that the two pediatricians would jump on me on us for saying a decision. It's not a cognitive thing. It's pure survival. It's what Dr. McKenna said. We are always responding to environmental demand. We are always responding at the level of our physiology and our psychology to environmental circumstances. What is the environment providing for me, and what is the environment asking of me? The only way we would have survived as a human species is to be able to adapt like that, to adapt if there's more predators in the environment. Our pregnant mother, our mother when pregnant with us, is going to be much more fearful, much more cortisol will be flowing. That is sculpting a different brain to be more hyperreactive, more hyper alert, so that it can avoid all the predators in the environment. I mean, that's a very simplified picture, but yes. So what are we teaching a child when we have it responding to its hunger cues with a pain? When a baby is hungry, that is a pain. It is a pain in the gut. And it's crying and trying to tell us that it's hungry. I'm talking now during the day while we're training it to go longer intervals. And we're there. I mean, it's almost to me worse than we're not even there. We're there, but we're like, look at this little toy. it's hard to wrap my brain around that. To me, it's like
Can
if
you
you were.
imagine if you came to my house and you told me you were hungry and I said,
Oh no,
"What?
I
Look
have a
over
little
here. Look over here."
I have a scenario. Imagine you woke up and you were in the hospital. You'd had some cataclysmic event and you don't really remember what happened, but you're just in this new place and you don't know anybody, some familiar voices, and you can't speak, you can't communicate, but you have this little noisemaker that you can make work. And when you push the noisemaker, when you get this gut pain, they come and they put something in your IV and it takes the gut pain away. And so you learn to push that noisemaker. Suddenly you're pushing the noisemaker because you've got this pain, and they come around and they're giving you crossword puzzles and they're turning on the TV and they're dancing for you, but they're not taking away the pain. Can you imagine the absolute frustration, the rage, so this is the imprint: mistrust, rage, anger.
Hmm. Mm-mm-mm. So let me get to another thing. So if we're talking about if your baby's sleeping for 6 hours a night and you're breastfeeding, what happens to you as a mom? Like we slept in a different position last night, so all night long when I'm feeding him, half asleep, I love sleeping next to him and nursing him because it does help me to sleep. So I wake up in the morning and this poor boob is like a rock because I didn't nurse him on that side. And I couldn't wait for him to wake up. I'm like, wake up, help me, help me.
Well,
So what
apparently,
happens if I didn't nurse on either side for 6 hours at a go? And if in the book they say that they encourage breastfeeding, but how can you encourage breastfeeding if you're telling somebody not to nurse for 6 hours at a go?
well, Gina, it is what we began with. This kind of advice is only possible to conceive in a bottle feeding culture where babies were always thought to be down the hall, and the only, as I mentioned several times, the only good baby is a sleeping baby. But now we know a lot more than we did 30 years ago, thank goodness. And we know that it's very, very important to keep babies out of stage 3 sleep, the deepest stages of sleep from which it's most difficult to get awake from. And what I've always argued insofar as SIDS is concerned, and I think it's been confirmed by the fact that room sharing babies that are in proximity with their mothers have a significantly less chance of dying from sudden infant death syndrome, that sleep itself is not the issue for babies. It's the ability to wake up. Because we're adults, our push in this culture is always to sleep longer and harder. But for babies, the reason that some babies we suspect die of sudden infant death syndrome is essentially they sleep too long, too hard, too soon. The mechanisms that promote sleep are very different from the mechanisms that permit reversibility, to get out of sleep very quickly. Babies are not designed to get out of deep sleep quickly because they never in their evolution ever spent much time in the deepest stages of sleep at very young ages when babies are really breastfeeding a lot. Our research has showed through the polysomnographic studies that babies spend much less time in that stage 3 and or 4 sleep and more time in lighter sleep, which permits them to terminate what is normally breathing pauses and apneas much more quickly. You don't want an arousal deficient baby, of which there's probably about 2 to 5% born with some kind of brainstem abnormality, perhaps due to maternal smoking. But you don't want that kind of baby spending a good amount of its time in the stage of sleep from which it has the least amount of capacity to get out of. And because getting out of it, arousing, is the major protective mechanism, the response to an apnea. Babies have to open their eyes first. The signals go to the cortical area, larger part of the brain, and by volition, willingness of the baby, it wills itself to take a breath, etc. And so what I'm trying to say is that babies should never be in that position where they're spending an enormous amount of their sleep cycle, of which there could be 3 or 4 during the night, in the deepest stages of sleep from which it's the most difficult to get awake from. You don't have to worry about that when you're sleeping in proximity to your baby, because your baby is detecting the smells of your milk, the heat, the sounds, the perturbations that occur simply when 2 people sleep together. And that engagement is continuous even when the baby is sleeping, and it's affecting the physiology, preventing the baby from spending its time in a mature part of sleep for which it's not designed at that age. Now, eventually, when babies get a year, 8 months, 7, their sleep cycles begin to mature a little bit, but not entirely. They're still not an adult. And what this book implies is that all of these issues pertaining to babies' neurological development and skills changing as they do in the first year of life are kind of irrelevant to some cultural model that assures that all will be well with the world, including babies, when in fact these recommendations are just utterly illogical, scientifically unfounded, they're dangerous, they're misconceptions, they're naive, you name it. And in terms of the way these things, these recommendations affect baby, it shows a gross negligence on the part of the physicians who know very little, seemingly, about what they are recommending and the consequences of that.
Well, speaking of which, that's the thing is I feel like there's a real lack of knowledge about breastfeeding and how it works. I put one of their quotes on our event page, and I asked if I could get an IBCLC to chime in. And one of them said that when we're talking about breast milk, what's not mentioned is that breast milk contains FIL, the feedback inhibitor of lactation. When milk remains, when milk remains in the breast for extended periods, one of like a 4-hour stretch in 24 hours is okay for baby on their own, but like we're talking about a longer stretch. The breast will respond to the FIL by decreasing the amount of milk produced. Eventually, the supply will dwindle, and the mother is left formula or donor milk feeding.
Right.
Well, again, there it is again, Gina. Response to environmental demand. You know, this is from back in the days. If God forbid your baby died, no more need for breast milk because there's no feeding happening. It's not all that complicated. It really isn't rocket science. Somebody wrote that on one of the Facebook
Bridget McKenna.
comments.
Not rocket.
Yeah, well, the body.
But it is science. It isn't rocket science, but it is science. And this fine Dr. McKenna is here as, sort of the pinnacle of that science.
Well, thank you for that. But I mean, again, it's the collective work of many people through the years, and it doesn't take much knowledge of that to know where these recommendations are just fallacious and certainly are not being given by individuals that know anything, as Gina, you were suggesting, really about breastfeeding, but worse, don't really appreciate its critical role in human healthy psychobiological development. In fact, I think one of the sadder things is that in many ways, many pediatric sleep researchers have always vested their career in a bottle feeding culture. And they're not prepared, nor is it easy for them to acknowledge that it was a fundamental beginning point that was fallacious, that the normal healthy baby is a solitary bottle-fed infant. All of their science to this day, the clinical models of human infant sleep are not predicated on numbers derived from mothers sleeping next to their babies and breastfeeding, which is the baseline default pattern to understand anything coming close to what normal sleep is for an infant. And I think it's kind of an unfortunate historical fact that when polysomnography, the ability to measure the physiology of sleep, occurred, only about 9% of women in the United States were breastfeeding, and it was still thought to be, well, wow, who would do that primitive kind of thing? Who needs it? We got chemicals and formula. But it was rather tragic insofar as the development of pediatric sleep, because all of their models continue on this day, even with 77% of American women now initiating breastfeeding. Even with that amazing score, the models are all anachronistic. They have nothing to do with the babies for whom they're intended. That is normative sleep, because even if you don't look at the 80% of the breastfeeding moms that are co-sleeping, just pretend they're not, the measurements that you're going to get from simply looking at sleep in the context of breastfeeding, they're completely different than are the models that are the gold standards that continue to be used against which breastfeeding babies are being compared. Now, these physicians have absolutely no appreciation of, they have no knowledge of. What do they expect the moms to do then that are breastfeeding? Instead of feeding their baby, go out in the kitchen and breast pump their milk so that, as you say, they don't lose their milk supply? Oxytocin and prolactin are unbelievably sensitive in terms of milk production. prolactin especially. If you let even 7 or 8 hours regularly go by between feeds, you're going to lose your milk, or you're going to get a diminution of it that will end up requiring you to supplement. Prolactin is unbelievably tied to the numbers of sucks that a baby gives per unit of time. And the prolactin is what asserts itself to prevent the follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone from being released into the body to give the okay to ovulate further. You know, lactational amenorrhea is determined by the amount of contact per unit of time that the baby has with the nipple. And even in our culture, it's kind of hard to have a long, prolonged birth interval based on that, because of women's access to calories and such that, you know, kind of change that geometry of prolactin and lactational amenorrhea. But that aside, the point is that you made earlier, Gino, is that when you really think of it, breastfeeding is not included in this particular model, because you're right, you need to keep your milk supply up, and your engorgement can be very, very uncomfortable. And the baby and the bodies, as was pointed out by both of you, is very economical. If it's not being used, it's not going to be secreted, it's not going to be produced.
So we have some questions. I want to see if we can get to at least one, because we're almost out of time. Someone said, I'm watching right now and I have a zillion questions. What about twins? So does the one mom have the capacity to respond differently, spontaneously? I think, okay.
Spontaneously?
Yeah, to sleep cycles, and how is she not ill from sleep deprivation?
Well, first of all, it's very hard. It's many of my friends that have had twins. It's pretty difficult, but when you keep the babies together, close together, they tend to synchronize as close as any two people would their sleep cycles, so that they tend to be on the same track. And since they have the same mother caring for them, it's very likely in this context that the babies are not going to be on completely different time schedules, because after all, don't forget, they have spent 9 months developing together. They're quintessential co-sleepers themselves. They're very much tied to the biology of the other. And insofar as that's true, though still a big challenge, granted, that the mother is not responding to two different sleep cycles. And what was the other part of the question?
Oh, okay. So, like, how is she not dead? Essentially, they want.
Well, that's a qualitative judgment, subjective. I'm not going to try that. Go there.
Right. It was about sleep deprivation. Well, I do want to talk about that, because I think people think if you're responsive to your baby at night, then you'll just be a zombie. I really do feel like I sleep better when I'm nursing, when the baby's in the bed with me, because we have like a little co-sleeper thing, and sometimes I use it, and I'll have him sleeping, you know, within arm's reach of me. But I don't sleep as well.
Right.
I find that I kind of like pop up every once in a while, like, is he okay?
Yeah.
If he just barely moves and he's far away from me, I'm awake more than if he's right next to me and he's moving around. It's not a big deal. I know he's okay. Yeah. So I feel like I sleep better because I'm with him. Am I imagining this, or is this something that you've found in your research?
Oh, absolutely. There's two things going on there. There's you and your baby. The baby is, by every bit of its nature, a contact seeker. Don't forget Niels Bergman's beautiful expression that the only thing to which the baby is adapted is the mother's body, which is the baby's natural habitat. And it is the only object to which this baby is in fact designed to live. Every part of a caregiver's body, and I will say fathers can provide it too, the only thing they can't give is the breast milk and breast delivery, but all the sensory exchanges that are critical for babies can be given by men as well, except for the nutritional part. But they need that. They don't want that. They need that, and their bodies function optimally on it, or with regards to it. Now, what was the other? There was one other little part to your. Oh, I was just going to make the comment that through the years of doing this research, don't forget, mothers are designed to make their babies happy, respond to their babies, and what makes their babies happy is, of course, what's good for them. Babies stop crying for a reason. Babies get settled for a reason. It has a function. It has a positive function. It has an evolved function. And so it's no big mystery why 80% of breastfeeding mothers, even when they don't plan to, they adopt some form of co-sleeping. And it's not surprising that little co-sleepers next to the bed aren't always satisfying to the baby who want to seek as close a contact with that caregiver as they can.
Okay, I wrote this down. Let's see if I can get back to this picture. Dr. Axness, I said that I saw one of the comments that you made, and it really sat with me for a long time. I thought about it last night for a long time. You said, if all we're concerned with is that they're still alive at the end of every day, then sure, we were talking about crying it out, but if we're just talking about like not responding to their needs, if we want them to have social intelligence and the neural capacities to succeed in an ever more complicated world, well, you might want to rethink this. If you want them to have a shot at actually have a happy life with true relational contentment, then you're talking about responding to the baby and how important that is. I don't think that parents get to hear about that, about what that means for the rest of their life. If what we're doing with sleep training, I heard this at one time at an attachment parenting conference. Somebody had said, we're not training them to sleep, we're training them not to trust.
Exactly.
And that really, it's hard to say without having an emotional response for me. I'm one of those emotional response people the doctors are talking about.
Oh, as if that's a bad thing. See,
right.
Well, they employ a lot of interesting little sort of debate techniques and rhetorical techniques by, making a very obviously true statement next to something that is completely wildly speculative and, as Dr. McKenna said, fallacious and dangerous.
Well, so for me, these new parents are hearing this, though, that's the most upsetting thing to me, that what it goes back to constantly is that the baby's a nuisance, the baby is this blob, that it's not having an experience, that it's not completely aware of what's going on with it. I think that's the most dangerous thing if you want to have a child who is, like you said, later on, wrapping it up into happy. Just if you want to have a child who has a wonderful experience in this world, do you want to start off by teaching it that if it cries for you or if it cries for food, that it's going to be ignored, that its not desires, that its needs will not be met.
Let me jump in.
This all goes back. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say one thing before I forget it. My memory is short. There was a statement in his book that babies are reassured by hearing the sound of their own cries.
Oh, yes, I wrote this down in my notes. He said sometimes it's helpful and healthy, emotionally healthy, for a baby to be reassured or comforted, I think, by his own cry.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable.
I don't even know where to begin by that. But all I can say is this goes back to Bowlby and internal working models. That baby is imprinting, is laying down a whole series of lessons. In fact, I use the term lessons. Well, I'm getting a big echo suddenly. Gina, are you okay?
Sorry about that. Yeah,
I'm hearing my own sound echo back in my ear.
Should be okay now.
I call attachment lessons embedded in relationship. What is this action? What is this communication teaching my child? And that's a handy go-to reminder for any parent. And also they can put themselves in the same situation, kind of like I did with the hospital exam. If somebody were responding to me in this way, what would this be teaching me about what I would be facing in this world? Responsiveness, comfort, all of these things that we've been talking about. These teach the baby, I can trust. The world is basically good. I can open up myself and go into it. I don't have to protect and defend. That goes back to what Joe was always saying. He says that we're always looking, is the environment such that I can unfold my fullest potential growth and really open up those prefrontals? Or is it threatening? Do I have to protect and defend? And that's really the through line, the main string of my whole book. Growth or protection.
So if you had one thing to say, Dr. McKenna, to, well, not one thing, but something to say to new parents who maybe just stumbled across this book, who are sleep deprived and I'm at the end of their rope right now, which is we talked before the beginning of the show. Like I said, I have a 3-month-old baby. This 3 months were rough.
Yeah.
And it's been really hard with a baby who is having a hard time nursing. It's been really hard. So, like I was saying, even though I know everything that I know, I was this close to just calling it quits on breastfeeding. And the only thing that kept me from not doing that is knowing everything that I know and how important it is. So for a brand new parent, if this is their first time with the baby, what would you say um, to them in regards to like this book? What would be the thing that you would want them to know the most?
I think I would probably remind them, and this is good for all of us, I think, that throughout millions of years of human evolution, there were no code books, there were no document blocks, there were no quote experts, who in Western culture, as far as I'm concerned, has never been a friend to babies, and not been a friend to parents either. When it comes down to it, call it what you will, Mother Nature has equipped mothers and fathers to respond appropriately to their babies. And the worst thing that's happening, or could happen in the culture, is that parents are so disempowered and feel so inadequate that they really do have to continuously look to external authorities to tell them what to do. Because if they do, they're not going to get a correct answer, because all babies are really different. And parents are in the best position to judge what makes their baby healthy and happy than an external authority. So more than anything else, I would remind myself that this is all new. It's looking outside your own circumstances to get answers to questions. If it's one thing that human beings are, anthropologically documented in every line of evidence, intelligent, perceptive, smart, great problem solvers. And I think that child is a great beginning point to really appreciate all of our communities, and that parents, in a sense, are prepared and ready to take this job as difficult as it is.
Fantastic. Dr. Axness, I would say ask the same question to you.
Well, you know, the doctors state that the baby needs to adjust to your life, not the other way around. And I would just start by saying that's just a completely, it's a false premise that speaks to all of the parents' greatest hopes. Maybe it doesn't have to be so hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
Okay, it's hard. If you want something, you want an addition to your family to be completely convenient and adapt to your life, get a pet.
Well,
I mean, when pediatricians open their book by quoting Seth Rogen's character in Knocked Up, we're done here. Check please.
Thank you. I think that's the thing that people don't want to hear. Dr. Narvaez from Psychology Today, I think she wrote an article called "Babies Are Needy. Does That Bother You?" Being a parent is very difficult. I am not afraid to say it. It is really, really hard. And and she does say at the end of the article, like, if you don't want to do all of this work, then maybe you do need a pet. And I think that sounds harsh, but the truth hurts sometimes. You know, when you're, like you said, you're taking on a new person into your life, it is really hard, and it doesn't get easier, it just gets different. You know, the difficulties that you have with a brand new baby are difficulties, and so are the ones that you have with an 18-year-old and your 35-year-old son. And it's just,
well, but you know what? I want to challenge that a little bit. I really believe, going back to my charting a sailboat sail analogy, if you chart yourself correctly and you set a framework for what your goals are, like I say in my book, you might end up harboring the dirty little secret of, I actually enjoy my teenager.
I love it. I love it. I get to meet people all over the country when I'm teaching my classes, and we talk about I ask everyone what their greatest achievement to date is. And I love hearing from moms who are just a little bit older than me that will say, my greatest achievement is that I like hanging out with my teenagers.
Yeah, that's worth being proud of.
So to get to that point, you really want to think about how important those first couple of years are in their lives, because they are very important.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you both for joining me. I know we could probably talk about this forever, and I would love it. But we want to keep it to at least an hour. So thank you, Dr. McKenna, for joining us, and thank you for the really important and wonderful work that you're doing out at Notre Dame. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Axness, for all that you do. Oh, I wanted to, I'm so mad. I wanted to promote your book, Dr. McKenna, but I don't have it in my bookshelf because it's at one of my clients' houses right now.
Oh, gee,
She had questions about whether she should sleep with her baby or not, and I said that's not for me to tell you, but here's some great information, and you can make up your mind after that. So that's at her house, but you both have wonderful work out there that's available for parents. I'll make sure to put it on our website when it goes back up. We just switched servers, so you can find us at Progressive Parenting Network, and hopefully we can have some more information available to you about co-sleeping in the future. Thank you so much again to my wonderful guests, and I guess if we had to sum it up, we would say that maybe the book on from the doctors is not something that we would recommend, yeah?
Right.
Okay, thanks again.
Get Elizabeth Pantley's book.
Oh, absolutely. I love Elizabeth Pantley's work for sure. I do want to share with everyone before we go that we have here we go, that we have a new sponsor at Progressive Parenting Network. I'm really excited about. Whoa, how cool is that effect?
Whoa.
That's neat. I think I did something wrong here. But we do have a new sponsor. Beautiful is the name of it. It's BEEYOUT-FUL. And what I wanted to try right now was just sharing this super cute video that they sent to me. Let's see if I can do it. Screen share. Let's do the Hangouts. Share. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes. Oh, there you go again.
Wonky crazy. Let's see if I can get it to do something else. This is just something brand new I'm trying, so bear with me here. Let's see. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So check this out.
Oh, not seeing that.
Oh, you can't see it?
No.
Oh, I'm so bummed out. So Beautiful is this wonderful company that's owned by this mom and dad, so it's a mom and pa owned company, and they have like the cutest little video of their family, and they talk about what they do. But since I can't share it right now, hopefully I can next time. It's BEEYOUTIFUL. And these wonderful people are our sponsors, and I've never had a sponsor before, our major sponsor, because I've been very, very, very picky about who I want to have, representing me. And I've never taken, like, what is that, the YouTube stuff where you get paid for and sponsors pop up on your page. I don't do that because I don't have any control over it, and I don't want Johnson & Johnson and Nestle and formula stuff on my page. So I'm really excited to finally have found a sponsor that is on the same level as us, and they get what we're trying to do, and it just means a lot to me. So I'm bummed I can't share that video. It's so cute. It's them and their family on their couch, and the kids are running around. It's fantastic. Anyways, I'll share it next time. I'll figure it out. Thank you guys for being with me. I really appreciate all that you're doing to help parents with their decision making. To the parents that are watching, I hope you enjoyed our information. If you want more, please subscribe to our YouTube page. And until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other.